Welcome, Augies Worldwide. It's a delight to be here today, and I'm here to tell you about my trip to the Dayton Hamvention. The Dayton Hamvention is the largest amateur radio gathering in the world. They get nearly 30,000 people there. It's held in Ohio, outside of Dayton, Ohio, at the Greene County Fairgrounds in Xenia. And the weather, we just hit it perfectly. It was 3 warm, sunny, if a bit muggy days there, and I had a blast. There are lots of things to do at the Dayton Hamvention. I opted to, this year, in addition to exploring all the exhibitors, to go spend a fair amount of time out in the flea market and see what all goes on out there. The last couple years, the flea market had issues because of rain and the pooling of the rainwater. They've done some things to make the walkways better, as I'll show you, but they've still got a ways to go to get that all fixed. In other news, the old venue for the Dayton Hamvention was at the ARRL Arena, which was partially destroyed by a tornado a couple days ago. Man, I'll tell you, I know a lot of people are nostalgic about going back to the ARRL Arena, but the fact is that they may not be able to. So let me show you some pictures. Now, just showing you the pictures isn't enough, so I recorded a little bit of a sound background, so it'll be more like looking at the pictures and help you feel like you're there. Here's the ticket counter at the entrance. Many people purchase their tickets in advance, so the line is not long. I paid the same-day price and got my ticket. I always forget getting the ticket until it's too late to do it by mail. Next was to take it to a tent set up by the Boy Scouts. For a small fee, they laminated your ticket and gave you a badge hanger. They do this as a fundraiser, and judging from the number of laminated tags at the Hamvention, they did very well. This is one of the 2 tents that comprise Building 6. There was hope after last year's Hamvention that the fairgrounds would construct an additional exhibit building on this site, but that didn't pan out, so the tents went up again. Very near the entrance to the Hamvention and also to that tent city there is the booth for QRP Labs, and I headed there first thing. Hans Summers, G0UPL on the right, is the brainchild behind the organization. He's the creator of the very popular QCX single-band QRP kit that is selling like hotcakes. They've sold more than 7,000 of them. I have one and reviewed it in a video a while back. A great little radio. Hans's next project is the QSX radio, a multi-band, multi-mode QRP rig. This is a prototype. It's not finished, and Hans is so busy he's not sure when it'll be released. I'm hoping soon. The Military Auxiliary Radio System, or MARS, had a booth also. Notice also a TV screen with the blurb for WWV's 100th anniversary. They'll be having quite a celebration from September 28th through October 2nd, 2019. Check out www100.com for details. There are hams among our military troops too, seen here chatting over lunch. Many different organizations had booths to explain what they do and seek new members. This is the booth for the Collins Collectors Association. Back in its day, Collins Radio made top-of-the-line radio equipment, still avidly sought by collectors. You'll see lots of Collins equipment when I get to the flea market photos. Maybe I should join because I have a Collins 75A4 ham receiver in the basement. It's about 60 years old. I made a video on it a couple years ago. These are ARRL antennas for sale. These particular ones are handheld UHF-VHF satellite antennas, very popular with the satellite crowd. Most of the vendors' booths had a supply of equipment on hand, and did a brisk business. They weren't just showing things, they were selling things. Over the last several years, DX Engineering has firmly established itself as a major player in retail ham radio mail order. They're located in Ohio, the same state as the Hamvention, and brought a large group. DX Engineering has established itself as a major player in antennas and has taken over a few old antenna companies such as Butternut. My primary station antenna is a Butternut HF9V, and they're still for sale. I saw one in their collection. Here, DX Engineering shows off more of its antennas. They always had quite a crowd. Elecraft makes high-end radios. Even their QRP radios are high-end. You can spend $1,000 for one. As many vendors do, Elecraft announced a new product at Dayton, the K4. The K4 is an all SDR radio. Here's the K4 up close. The Elecraft's radios are the cat's meow for high-end contesters and DXers. The screen packs in a lot of information and is touch sensitive. Here one K4 is controlling another via Ethernet, meaning this type of control, or a subset of it, can be done over the internet. MFJ had a gigantic booth as well. This is Richard Stubbs, a key player at MFJ. They seemed to have one of everything they sell on display. They had many staff members on hand, all knowledgeable about MFJ's extensive product line. I've reviewed quite a few MFJ products, and Richard told me he'd be sending me more. Ameritron, an MFJ company, makes amplifiers of every description, from traditional tube type to the latest all solid-state devices. Because solid-state amps are still rather more expensive than tube amps, the latter still sell well. Here are more Ameritron amps, tuners, and power supplies. They have quite a lineup, actually. Cushcraft and High Gain, both antenna companies, are also MFJ companies, and their antennas are on display, or you could purchase one there too. Big crowd, you bet. Close to 30,000 people attend Hamvention every year. Note the Vibroplex sign in the upper middle. Vibroplex has gone through quite a few hands, but is the oldest name in ham radio. It originally made speed keys, often called bugs, for landline telegraph operators, but soon became known as the very best for keys for ham and shipboard operators also. They had an array of their keys out, each connected to a code practice oscillator, so folks could try their hand at CW. Here's a shelf full of Jetstream equipment, mostly power supplies and SWR meters. This is in the plaza between the major buildings. Several food vendors had their hands full keeping everyone fed. There were tables and bleacher stands to sit on. ICOM provided some umbrellas for the table shade. The weather was warm and muggy, but fortunately no rain to speak of. Around noon, the food lines got long. I tended to eat at booths that had the shortest line. Here's Alex of Alex Loop. He's PY1AHD Alexander Grimberg from Brazil. He makes a variety of small portable loop antennas for HF. He showed me a small accessory he built that clips onto where the loop antenna itself connects to the capacitor. It has an LED and glows most brightly when the antenna is in tune. I'll test this out and let you know how it goes. I stopped by Tom Medlin's booth a number of times, though I didn't spend as much time there as I did last year. Tom, W5KUB, in the white shirt, live streams the entire time of the Ham Fest. He also has a weekly live stream every Tuesday at 8 p.m. U.S. Central Time. You can watch it at w5kub.com. Here, Tom conducts an impromptu on-the-air interview with Howard Nurse, W6HN, and Martin Jew, K5FLU, the owner of MFJ. They're discussing a new MFJ product, the MFJ 1234, the RigPi station server that allows you to operate your home rig from another location via the internet. There was a huge booth for the ARRL where I purchased the new ARRL study guide for the general class license that covers the question set that becomes effective the 1st of July in 2019. I'm going to be redoing the general videos to update them to the new question set. Clustered around the ARRL booth were booths from sister organizations, including the Japan Amateur Radio League and the Deutscher, or German, Amateur Radio Club. The Dark Table was especially busy because they brought with them copies of their big antenna book translated into English. They couldn't sell them at Dayton because of the complexities of selling in the United States, including tax laws and so on. But I looked it over and will have to order one. Another group Dark brought with them were 4 of their YOTA members, or YOTA stands for Youngsters on the Air. Note that 2 of them are wearing traditional lederhosen. Although these young people didn't really look like youngsters, they brought a singular enthusiasm. I spent quite a bit of time with them, asking them why Germany and Austria were having so much success bringing young people into ham radio, and I got quite an earful of ideas and best practices from them that I will discuss in a separate video. This next picture is taken from the ARRL letter and shows all 4 of the German YOTA members. 1 on the left is from Austria, the other 3 are from Germany. All were very articulate in English. Next to the Dark booth was the Radio Amateurs of Canada, one of 2 nationwide amateur radio organizations in Canada. All 3 of the big Japanese vendors, ICOM, Kenwood, and Yaesu, had big booths at Dayton. Here's Ray Novak of ICOM's marketing department. ICOM's IC7300 SDR HF rig is a big seller. I just reviewed it a video or so ago. Several Dayton attendees told me my video review is what tipped them over the edge to purchase the 7300. I think they'll be delighted with the rig, though I do advise perseverance, my favorite word, because there's lots to learn. Flex Radio, which sells only SDR radios, is an American company. They make a series of radios, some of which require a computer to act as the human-machine interface. Others, such as the one shown in the foreground, have a more standard user interface. Flex Radio, though rather pricey for its upper-end rigs, is very much on the forefront of software-defined radio and provides an exceptional product. The Amateur Satellite Organization, AMSAT, is in charge of all amateur radio satellites from most of the world and coordinates closely with hams from other parts of the world who launch amateur satellites. The satellites are invariably carried to space piggyback on some other important launch. You can learn anything you want to know about amateur satellites, including about the ones you can work with a handheld antenna, at their website at www.amsat.org. Here's a close-up of the very first orbital satellite containing amateur radio, or OSCAR for short. It's not very big, is it? It went up as ballast on a rocket launch. Tentec went out of business a few years ago, and the name has changed hands several times. They were back this year with a booth at Dayton, but you can see they're still in a building mode. They have one 100-watt HF transceiver for sale, the Eagle, and several QRP radios. My main rig for over a decade was a Tentec Jupiter fine radio. I wish them the best as they get back on their feet. There is a venerable radio club in the U.S. that's even older than the ARRL. It's the Radio Club of America. Although pretty low-key, their members contain some of the movers and shakers in the amateur world. They never went into publishing the way the ARRL did, but they do remain a force behind the scene. Now, I'm wondering if you could take a break for just a moment and click on like for this video and also subscribe. By doing that, you tell Google that these videos are worth sharing, and it helps me bring these videos to other people. So if you just click like and subscribe, and then you can go back to watching this full screen. Next, we step away from the main exhibit buildings and over to the fairgrounds racetrack infield, given over completely to the swapfest. Here, anyone can rent a space and set up to sell to other attendees. This photo shows the variety of ways it can be done, whether selling directly from a pickup's tailgate or perhaps something a tad fancier. You also get a good look at the crowd, almost all male and tending to be older. Here's one of the fancier swapfest vendors with all manner of small items such as tools, connectors, solder, you name it. I was surprised to find a few empty spaces. A couple years ago, the Dayton Hamvention moved from its long time but shutting down location at the Hera Arena, now wrecked by a tornado, to its present location at the Greene County Fairgrounds in Xenia, just outside Dayton. By the way, it's kind of ironic because all those Greene County Fairground buildings were destroyed in a tornado about 30 years ago, and have since been rebuilt into the very nice facility it is now. The swapfest went to the then all-grass infield when they moved Hamvention to Xenia. The area got pretty flooded out during the 2017 Hamvention, and the grass just turned to mud. This year they put out some quasi-pavement for the paths, but my examination of the drainage showed that the spaces could still flood in hard rain, which apparently did happen last year. I was at Dayton last year in 2018, but did not go out to the swapfest because it was raining. This year found all 3 days warm and sunny, so sunny I got pretty sunburned. I think the drainage problem still needs to be solved, but fortunately the weather cooperated this year. The vendor in the area that has the blue tarp has some old, quote, boat anchor, unquote, equipment. My eye for old equipment isn't perfect, but on the left is a Johnson, then a Collins, then two Hallicrafters receivers. One of them is an S20R. I have one at home just like it. The vendor in the red truck is selling an old Army communication shelter. On the left is more Collins equipment, including what looks like a phone patch along with two speakers. Phone patches were very common in the days when long-distance telephones were very expensive, and also during the Vietnam War, very often the soldiers could call home on the Mars network, and then their call would be phone patched to their family. It was a rather cool system. It's been completely replaced by different technology these days. These brownish boxes are old sets from the late 1920s and early 1930s. On the right is an RCA Victor orthophonic hi-fi AM/FM tabletop receiver, back in the days when hi-fi was all the rage, before it was replaced by stereo equipment. Here's more of the crowd. See that guy on the scooter? My back was out and I wanted to see all of the swapfest, so I rented one of those scooters myself on Saturday, and am sitting on it as I take these pictures. They weren't cheap at $70 per day, but mine enabled me to see the swapfest. Given the demographics of amateur radio, they had several dozen of these for rent, and they actually ran out on Saturday. I'm glad I got there early enough to rent one. All the vendors were willing to bargain, and lots of stuff changed hands. The swapfest had a pickup point where customers could drive their vehicles to pick up swapfest bargains, rather than having to carry heavy equipment around. The only thing I bought in the swapfest area was an old typewriter, and fortunately it fit on the scooter. Look at the variety here. Those weird-looking things on the right are dummy loads. Wow, look at all that Collins gear. Collins radio equipment was really sturdy. After restoration to replace old components that no longer work, such as resistors that have changed value, leaky capacitors and whatnot, these radios still do their magic and are much sought after. Here are more tailgate sales. The radio with the twin dial on the left is a Hallicrafters. He also had a couple old analog oscilloscopes and some SWR meters. Here are more boat anchors, including a Johnson Viking 2 and a Drake transmitter. There are some newer rigs too by ICOM, an IC746 and an IC756, which both, by the way, are very good radios. Here, one of the vendors successfully demonstrates an old military radio. And wow, this is vintage gear at its best. This is an Amico model AC1 CW transmitter. It's been so thoroughly restored it looks brand new. To change bands, you change the plug-in coil and the crystal. This was designed for the new novice class license at the time, so that takes this back to the 50s and 60s. Oh, now here's a trip down memory lane. This is the classic Kenwood TS520 HF CW and single sideband rig, which was available at the time I became a general in 1975. My friends bought these. I opted for a Yaesu FT201. I've always wanted one of these Kenwoods, but this one at $300 was way outside my price range. Both the 520 and the 201 had a tube driver and two tube finals and had to be tuned to the band like any other tube rig of the day. The no-tune modern radios are all transistor and use broadband amplifiers. Here's more old military equipment for sale. There's an entire sub-hobby surrounding old military HF equipment. Some of it can be used directly on the 80 and 40 meter ham band, and other equipment must be modified for ham radio use. After World War II, the surplus market was flooded with military equipment, and modifications were available to put these pieces of equipment on the ham bands. 75 years later, the philosophy has changed a bit, with the idea that pristine equipment should be left pristine or restored to pristine, but not further modified. Back inside the exhibit buildings, here's the booth for TAPR, or Tapper. Tapper originally stood for Tucson Area Packet Radio, and these folks were pioneers of digital modes. Now, even their website blurb about their history simply uses the initials TAPR. Their organization continues at the forefront of digital data. Want wire? Here's a vendor with anything you want, and as much as you want. Diamond Antenna is known for its VHF and UHF antennas, and I have one myself, but this exhibit shows the many accessories they offer as well. Here's JK Antennas with one of their HF Yagis assembled. It's quite big, as you can see. The company also sells the Force 12 antennas. Here are more antennas, these from M Squared. They seem to come in every shape imaginable. They have some setups for satellite antennas that have both azimuth and elevation rotors. Now, here's a serious loop antenna. I mean serious. From Loop Antenna by I3VHF, which is an Italian call sign. What a monster. A small one is in the background. Elenco, the fourth Japanese radio vendor, shows some of its wares here. Elenco is not nearly as popular as all the big Japanese manufacturers, Yaesu, Kenwood, and ICOM, but Elenco also sells a lot of commercial HF equipment too. Now here's a booth of high customer interest. Google says the text on the sign is Norwegian, meaning welcome the 17th of May. May 17th was the first day of the Dayton Hamvention. An area was set aside for MCOM type vehicles, and here are some of them set up with various antennas. You should see the insides of some of these vehicles. Truly amazing. It's like the console of the space shuttle. Here's another antenna set up with a single band beam on top of an upside down hex beam. And here's the van it's attached to. Lastly, here are a couple selfies. This is with Daniel Kochanowicz, N0REY, of Bridgecom from Smithville, Missouri. Bridgecom sells repeaters and the Anytone line of Chinese radios. And here I am with Aaron Arden, KY5ARA, of Hanson, Kentucky, in one of the smaller exhibit buildings. Take a look at any of these URLs, each of which offers a way to support this channel financially. Your support is greatly appreciated and has allowed me to attend Dayton for the second year in a row. Until we next meet, this is Dave, KE0OG 73.